So maybe we could start off. Whereabout do you live in the UK?
I live in the wonderful county of Essex,
Okay.
Oh,
um, which is basically, I live in the northeast edge of London because I
Mhm.
used to work in London. So it's basically what used to be the old Epping Forest, which was the haunt of Dick Turpin and and Boudicca and other types of historical characters. Um, but so yeah, so pretty close to London, so I could get in and out for work
yep.
every day. But hey, now I don't have to work anymore, so I'm just chilling. So it's pretty good.
And are you hosting the game, or are you going to your mate's place?
No, I'll be going to the mate's place. He does. He likes to put on the whole shebang.
Yep.
Not only do we have a wonderful war game, but then he cracks out a very fine evening meal,
Oh,
usually involving a huge half pig or something,
nice.
crackling, red wine, and obviously we have to get a cab home. So
And is it a multiplayer game?
yeah, I think there'll be about six of us, 6 or 7 of us there. So yeah, it's always pretty good.
And you'll be
So
spreading that over how big a table or tables?
oh yeah, he's it's not his table's not massive, but it's big enough. I think it's about 15 foot by 5 and a bit. So it's big enough.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
actually substantial.
yeah,
Mine's 12, so 12 by 5.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. I
Um,
think once you get to the size of once you're about 12 by 5, 6-ish, that can cater for, some pretty big
does most
games.
things, yeah.
It's
And
good.
then you
Yeah.
need the shuffle sticks to push things along because you can't reach the middle of the table.
Yeah. Well, because he's very clever, he's done it at 5.5, I think, which is just right. You can just still get to the middle without needing those, either those Battle of Britain push sticks or
I
those little steps that you have to step on at places like the
yeah,
Woodlands Holiday
absolutely, yeah.
Centre. Yeah.
I went to Waterloo during the 200th anniversary, and Barry Hilton was
Oh,
the
Barry, yeah.
Barry was
Yeah.
the tour guide. He was discussing one of the games that they regularly play up north, and they have a
Mm.
hatch in the middle of the table. And somebody crawls in the middle and just pops up in the middle of the hatch so they can reach
Yeah.
the middle of the table. So
Just just make sure your troops are clear of it before
yes,
the
could get
inevitable
ugly.
earthquake.
Very good.
Oh,
Well, let's start. We'll ask the opening question that we
Yeah.
asked.
All right. So
yeah.
let's just make sure that I am actually recording.
You
Yes,
are recording?
I am recording.
Yeah,
I've got the little record button up there, so
Great.
I hope.
Excellent.
Yeah,
that's great. And we're going to start on time because we get laggards and we've been waiting for them. This time they'll serve them right.
yeah, tough. Yeah.
So the first question that we like to ask is, how did you get into wargaming?
That classic one. I am of that typical I suppose 70s really, British airfix generation. So all kids got packets of airfix soldiers or airfix model kits for birthdays, Christmas, whatever. And I was no different. Got a few model kits, got kind of into it, quite enjoyed model making, tanks mainly, but the occasional plane or even ship turned up in the collection. But I was like every other boy, I just collected every pack of airfix soldiers going. So instead of collecting one army with 20 T-34s, I had every army going under the sun with every single tank that you had in the airfix catalogue. So my German force would have one Tiger, one Panther, one Panzer IV, one Panzer III, etc., etc. And I was introduced to wargaming by 3 very erudite farmers' sons that lived just down the road from me, who were some pretty switched on cookies. And they said, "What are you doing chucking marbles and things at them? This is what you want to do. and they used a very simple form. I think it must have been one of Donald Featherstone's or Charles Grant's rules. It's basically just D6 to hit, 4+ if you're in the open, 5 soft cover, 6 hard cover, and your troop. And depends what we had an interesting system. It depended what the man airfix figure was doing. So if he was charging, he could go 12 inches or something. If he was standing, he could go 8. Kneeling was 6, and crawling a mere 2. So I always found that a bit odd that my machine gun teams, because they were always lying down in airfix or 90%. Our evening, Mikey boy. They weren't going very far. So we had some interesting games with those, and then we had a program on in the UK that was called Battleground. I think it was called Battleground, that had Peter Gilder, and he basically showcased his Gettysburg setup, his Waterloo setup, and I think there was a Civil War setup, and that's what pushed me into actually going out to a shop and buying some rules. So I started off with, oddly enough, Airfix's Bruce Quarry's Napoleonic rules,
Great.
and I went on from there. Yeah, that's it. Wonderful rules they were, perhaps. So that's it. So I got into it. It was very common, I think, in the kind of in about the 1970s in the UK. It was just basically Airfix fed you into wargaming or military modelling. Depends which route you took.
And then what happened from there?
I was joined at a local club.
Yep.
And I used to live in Taunton, which is in Somerset, which is the southwest. I'm sure you probably know it. If you look at the United Kingdom, look at that leg or that strip of land that's going off to the west towards America. I lived down there, joined the local club. They played all sorts of rules, WRG Ancients, various Napoleonic, skirmish, sci-fi, you name it, they did it. So I was with those for quite a few years, until I realised that whilst we were playing a game of Grand Manor, I think it was, which we played quite a bit of, I had my glorious 95th Rifles, which I thought, right, I want to deploy the 95th into skirmish order. And they went, oh, you can't do that. I said, well, I beg your pardon. You know, your typical war gamers, what? The war gamer rant followed. I said, hang on a minute, this is the 95th. Well, they said, oh, the rules, light infantry don't behave any differently to anyone else. It's just skirmishers, you know, 6 figures or something somewhere. So that, I thought, I'm not having that. So went off, did a load of research, which kind of obviously one step led to another, which led to, so I wrote various rehashes of Grand Manor. Then in the end, I thought, well, I've rewritten this so many times, I might as well just write my own variant of it. And I called it General de Brigade. Mm-hmm. And then other aspects of life got in the way. So I put that to one side. I did moved to London, got different jobs, did different things. And then eventually it resurfaced with the local club down here in Essex. I took it off to Caliber Books after it had been play tested for quite a while, and rehashed because of all my sort of new job / military experiences. Thought, no, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And it was published by Caliber Books, which was very good of them, because I think it was 1996, it wasn't easy to publish rules in those days. It was kind of still dominated by WRG and other types. And I was very grateful for that. And unbelievably, it seemed to go down reasonably well. And that was kind of the start.
And from there, that's, I suppose, look, we're looking back nearly 20 years now, and you've been very prolific over the last 10 years, but even the 10 years from when, General de Armee came out and all the supplements, etc., it looks like you've regularly been researching and publishing. And so, how have you fitted all that in with your other life and gaming?
Yeah, well, I don't know whether it's I was either fortunate or unfortunate, but I did for most of my career I've done shift work. So I'd either be doing an early shift, which meant I got back home at 3 o'clock ish. So I had that chunk of time that I could dedicate to either reading, research, wargaming, painting figures, etc. And the same when I was on a late shift. I didn't start till 2. So the morning I just used to research stuff, write stuff, etc. And the same when I was on night duties. I quite like nights because you had the whole day to do whatever you want, get a quick kip before you go to work, and you're on. So I had a lot of time that I used to basically research, write, and playtest. And just doing a couple of hours a day, you can churn it out.
Yep. And at the time before the internet came out, so this was all book research and the library. How did you get about researching?
Well, one of the things was I did 2 ways. It's either libraries, or we went to, there was a thing called the Napoleonic Fair in London, which was brilliant at the time because, and we just took a war game down to do a bit of a demo game, but the Napoleonic Fair was really a book fair for authors, and all the known kind of authors were there. So by putting a war game on, I got, myself and my colleagues got an in with all the authors. So you met Chandler, Stuart Asquith, all the Napoleonic kind of reenactment societies were there. Peter, what was his name? Peter Hofstrower. And I think he's kind of disgraced himself now. And various others. So all the people that wrote articles for Napoleonic magazines were there. Even Bernard Cornwell. So I remember once having a good chat with Bernard Cornwell, not about Sharp, but about his Arthurian tactics and stuff. So you could dig in, and they would either point you in the direction of their research papers, or sometimes they'd send you a whole bump. I'd get a great big brown envelope in the post that unfortunately wasn't stuffed with cash. It was stuffed with Napoleonic research and stuff like that. So that was useful. And I did other things. Like I always said to myself, well, one of the things was, if you're going to write a set of World War II rules, you probably need to know what basic military training is all about. So I joined the reservists, and I did lots of stuff with them. And I even, for a very short time, I thought I need to research Napoleonic drill. So I went off with one of the reenactment societies in down here in Kent, and just did a couple of weekends with them. I had no intention of being a dedicated reenactor, but I thought, stand in 3 ranks, do the musketry drill, do the basic drills to get a feel of what it's like to be in 3 ranks, what it's like to give orders, how easy is it to do that. And then you put that on top of your kind of military training, and then put that on top of the research, and it went on from there. But as you say, the internet changed everything.
Good and bad, I suppose.
Yeah.
So let's say before we get into the world of the internet, you'd already started writing your rules and researching.
Yeah.
And you said you got into it because you were having arguments or just being disgruntled with the ways that other people were interpreting things, which sounds quite common from the others that we talked about. So when you were approaching designing your own games or tweaking others, what were the things that you thought were most important? What were the elements that you thought were missing that you were going to try and address to make it better for everyone, or at least better for you?
Yeah, it's better for, yeah, better for me. That's right. I'd like to say there's two main things. First of all, one was always been command and control. I've never most of the war games that we've played either didn't have any at all, or it was a command radius. And I've never quite. I know why they did it, and I can understand why they used kind of command radius as a game mechanic. It kind of works, but it didn't. It had no bearing for me on reality. And I think, you know, Napoleon didn't say to Ney, "Oh, just stay at 500 yards, mate, because if you go to 501, I can't command you." It's I've never heard that in any of the roles I've had. Command radius has nothing to do with it. So command and control was one. The fixation with weapons ability, you know, the ability of a weapon in inverted commas, as opposed to the training of the man. The classic was, for me, was the WRG ancient rules, where if you had a two-handed axe or any kind of two-handed weapon, regardless of the training of the individual, you were suddenly a super soldier, because it got something like +3 in combat. And I was always arguing, well, hang on a minute, what about if you had a Roman legion or a Spartan who's been trained for 10 years, knows what they're doing, comes up against someone who was given the axe yesterday? Why is he still getting +3 in the Roman legion? He's getting his head stoved in. And so it's got nothing. It's, you know, weapons have an impact, but it's not the weapon, it's the man. So one of the themes was much more about the man and not the weapon, or not the national characteristic. You know, I can remember Bruce Quarry, whereas the French would march at whatever, I think it was 150 millimeters a turn, and the poor old Austrians are on something like 70. I thought, well, just marching's marching, isn't it? It doesn't really, you know, and the commands are probably all very similar. Appreciate the Austrians might have had difficulties with larger battalions and different languages, etc. But on the whole, well, it's not. It's the man, the training. And there's probably another one somewhere. Oh yeah, and basically about trying to, which is coming later, is trying to simplify systems so that we're not referring to charts all the time and looking through great big lists of factors, which I've slowly but surely have been introducing.
Yeah.
So it's those three things.
And I think you've hit on what everyone else has sort of been saying around that we've interviewed so far. It's, well, all the charts and the simulation and the data is one thing. It's the morale or the influence of control and how that influences people is the other. Yeah. And I suppose the other thing that people have come out is the game fun. So is it a game first or a simulation first? How do you view that?
Yeah, it's all. I always go down the line. Is yes, it is a game, and to be fair, we're not simulating really military combat. It's pretty far removed. I think somebody used the expression, just needs to be plausible, which I think is probably about right. Is it a plausible recreation of military action? Well, yes, it is. But I always have. I think you need to have 1 foot in playability, the fun, the game, and 1 foot in simulation. I mean, I've not played games, I've done exercises where they were just military simulations over, you know, that went on interminably over 2 days or something, and they are just dull as ditch water. You know, we would just, you know, they would just go, right, okay, whatever, 20 div, that moves now to here, it's lost 10%, blah, blah, blah. And it was just all dictated to you. You thought, this could be a brilliant war game if you rolled some dice and had some models. But it was just on a map, you know, your classic military maps with, you know, divisional boundaries and all that sort of stuff. So pure simulation is dull.
When were you doing that?
I was doing that when I was in the reserves. I did a lot of.
90s.
So I initially started off with the infantry because I wanted to learn what it was like to do all infantry work. So if you're writing World War II rules, you've at least got some idea of what it's like to be an infantryman. And just as an aside, one of the classics was, which you can dispel, was that the machine gunner or the gunner in a section moves slower because he's carrying the machine gun. Well, in the world of the military, the gunner is normally the biggest and fittest bloke, and he moves faster than everyone else because it's the most important asset. So it was little things like that. So I did that, then moved
the
on.
ammunition behind him to keep him fed up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, other you're carrying the gun. Other people love the ammo. Thank you very much. So yeah, you do that, and then I moved on to do other things, which was which involved lots of exercises, map exercises, joint exercises, loads of stuff like that, which was akin to wargaming.
Yeah,
I can remember doing we had a Warsaw Pact in those days. It seems to have all come back to us again, unfortunately. And we used to have to do recognition, enemy kit recognition. And I was always in the exams because you had to it was a long old slog to get through. But one of the exams was vehicle recognition, and I was brilliant at it because I was a war gamer. I could just go. Yeah, it's and what they used to do, they used to try and sneak in. It would all be Soviet kit and the odd NATO kit which you had to get over it. You had to always get over a certain mark, but they would always chuck in something like a World War II T-34 85 or a Sherman or something, which would be the gotcha question to catch everyone out. But of course, I just went, oh yeah, Sherman 76, Mark whatever, or it's a T-34 85, and they'd always go, how do you know all this? Well, it's because I made airfix kits.
Yeah.
And on one occasion, I just put on a kind of an exercise using, I think they were GCHQ kits, not even kits, the GCHQ modern range. I think were they 285 something? Yeah, what's that? And I just sprayed them all green, put them on a kind of like a diorama in situ, and we had people come in and they had to view them from a certain distance. And they got about 5 seconds for each section. What's that? What's that? What's that? Sort of thing. And I was trying to get models of wargaming into the dull military exercises that we used to do.
So it's quite interesting. So Jeff, who's our president, who's not here because he's flying off to go and do more military stuff, and he's talking to the military wargaming people, the Australian military, because wargaming as we know it is now coming into their training.
Yeah.
As to help prepare people and get different different expectations from leadership positions down from platoon level, etc.
Yeah.
So all circles. So in the 90s, you published Grand de Brigade, and you also did Battle Group Panzer Grenadier.
Yep. Yeah.
And that was at the time as the internet's coming through and everything else. So how did you find that experience and getting it out there? And I suppose it's a stepping stone for the last 10 years.
Yeah, it was. The thing I did with General de Brigade was I didn't know what to expect. I just thought I got a set of rules published, and it had for the time, it had a glossy full color cover. And I thought, wow, that's it. I've made it. I'm there. And I thought, so the way I went about publicizing it is I did, again, 3 things. One was articles in magazines. So you put articles out in magazines, go to conventions to advertise it so people will see it in action. And then what I did also was follow up with the people that had expressed an interest. So I just basically just gave them my phone number. And I said, you've got any issues, phone me. You know, rather than those the old-fashioned thing of, well, if you've got a question about Rule B, send a letter with a stamped addressed envelope and you might get a reply in, you know, several months. I just said, what's the point of that, isn't it? That I'm quite prepared for people to ring up and they can go, I don't understand this rule or that rule. You know, they could even say, I think that rule's completely wrong. Well, fair enough. We can have a discussion and maybe I can learn some things or maybe they can learn some things, whatever. But those three things, those three aspects, did work quite well. So I got quite a lot of attention at the shows, and then met in with people like Duncan McFarland, who ran Miniature or War Games Illustrated. And then he published a few articles on the game, and then it kind of accelerated from there. And then I was fortunate enough to get one of the early forums put up, which was the General de Armee forum, which is pretty much defunct now. But at the time, that was it. So did all that, and then once the internet came along, the forum did the work for you. So it was those three lines that all led to the forum, and then the internet does its work.
For good or bad.
Yes.
So, I think it's quite interesting because coming into the 2000s and the forums were becoming popular and behavior for people, etc. How did you find your forum and the feedback, and then what people loved or hated? How did that, well, did that have an influence on how you design games or how you thought about what you were doing?
If I'm to be honest, it probably didn't. The forums were great because most people were quite respectful, which was quite unlike some other forums we could mention, but I won't go there. And they were genuinely interested in playing the rules and understanding why I had gone down a certain road or avenue with the rule. And generally, I thought that's all what most of it's been about. It's if you introduce a different method of thinking or a different way of doing things. I think most wargamers are pretty switched on cookies. They're not. Most wargamers are pretty intelligent and they know what they're doing. So all they need is to say, I'm doing, I do, you know, whatever. I don't give a column +1 in melee for this reason. And once they've got that, they'll go, oh, okay, right, I understand where you're coming from now. I mean, some will still go, no, well, I still think it should be it should be +3 or whatever. But most of them will just go, right, I've got where you're coming from. And then either the dialogue will continue because they can come back with examples and you can say, well, I've got this example or whatever. And then you can go, right, well, I'll put the learning that I've had on there. You just put it all down, store it all away for your second edition or whatever it is. And they crack on. So much of the forum was very good for that. Most of it was very positive, and you learn a lot. Put it all to one side, and if and when there's a second edition, that's when the benefits and the fruits of those discussions come out.
So at that time, and you've got your games out and you've got the forum, you've got people involved, are you playing other systems as well? Or, you know, how did you balance your own game with playing other people's games?
I beg your playing other systems? Yes, unfortunately, I had to. I don't play, to be honest, I don't play many because obviously I wrote the rules because that's the kind of war game I wanted to play. So I tend to play my own, but I will play other rules because I think it's important that you get that input. So I've played, I do play quite a bit. Lots of Peter Pig rules. I've played. Looking at their systems, I've played, and God forgive me for this, I've played Flames of War and Team Yankee. which is everything. Every time I play it, I mean, it's great because the guy that we go to play it has a fantastic collection. So you have every bit of kit is on the table. But I you know, basically, I almost have a mental breakdown after I played it, and we just think, what is this about? But it's, you know, it's fun. I played various other Napoleonic rules, because you've always got to touch your toe in the water. You think, you know, how are they doing it? You know, you're always thinking, is it better than my rules? Is it better? No, it's not. I mean, I was up. I was lucky enough to go. I was with the Perrys in Nottingham, where they were play testing Fortitude and Valour with Jervis Johnson. So we had a very nice game with him. We play tested, had a chat, look at stuff. You know, it was fine. It wasn't. It's not my game, clearly, because, you know, I prefer to do things a different way. But it was fun, and you always take away stuff. There's always one thing that you'll take away from any game mechanism. You think, oh, actually, that's not too bad. That's quite an interesting way of doing it. Though I haven't played, I don't think I've played Ancients since the DBM days, which is quite a while.
Yeah, I was big into DBM, but I always thought it was deadly boring manoeuvres, and so they didn't talk to me.
Yeah, I couldn't. I had to give up. I mean, I thought that DBA, when it first came out, was a very clever game as a development of a war game. I thought very clever, very simple, very effective. But personally, I don't think it had a lot to do with ancient warfare. It was just what it was. But yeah, I will play different systems, even fantasy. Yeah.
Oh, well, what have you done there?
I've it's my 40k and various other things. Space Hulk. There's, you know, another Glorious Day in the Core, or various stuff like that. But when the boy was at that sort of age, he was a teenager, we just went to war game shows, and I had to. The way I broke him into war gaming is every time I came back from a war game show, I would buy him go to the Bring and buy a handful of second-hand Space Marines or whatever it would be, because there's always loads on the Bring and buy, and just presented him with a small present, and then eventually he made his own armies, and we'd play 40k, and he still, though he's in his 20s now, he still plays quite a bit of 40k.
That's good, and then maybe you'll have a third generation come along soon.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So one of the, I think we're in a golden age of wargaming because of the internet and technology. So the ability for people to publish books that have the same periods but play differently, and the variety of figures and other companies that have spawned out there means that we're spoiled for choice, which I think is really exciting, because you can have one army and play it multiple different ways depending on the rules.
Yeah.
Do you see that out there? Is that something that you play for? I think there's an opportunity to develop.
Yeah, definitely. It's you know, if you go back a few years, there was basically one rule that people would take to the club, and they'd either play it or they wouldn't. And publishing rules and designing rules wasn't easy. Now I think all those barriers have gone. You can knock it up on your own computer. You've got professional publishing products, PDFs, etc., that can push out rules either through publishing companies or privately. Yeah, and I think we are, as you say, we are definitely in a golden age. There's probably more gamers, more rules, more figure ranges than has ever been before, and they're all dead easy to get hold of. You've literally just got one click on the good old interweb, and the rules are downloaded in seconds. You've got your PDF, you either print them off or you don't, or whatever. Your figures come through as part of a Kickstarter, and then you start the process of your 3D printer whirring away to produce them. It's completely different, and we're in a yeah, a golden age is a very good way of putting it. And some people mention the greying of the hobby. Well, yeah, I don't think so. I think there's such a proliferation of games and gaming that we're now merging over with board games, where the new developers are coming up with, it's called, what's it called, the war game boardification, is where the two are kind of merging together. So many of the new games that are coming out are basically board games, but with figures and war game mechanics.
Yeah.
And
many of the board games are coming out with figures because it makes them so absorbing.
I mean, not gone completely, but the days of buying sort of like Avalon Hills, whatever it was, I can't remember. I think I bought Barbarossa once, and it was so big that we had to lay it out on the living room carpet. Took 4 days to cut all the counters out and put them out, and then the cat trod all over them, so we had to reset it.
Those days, you lost your counters.
That's right. Yeah, those days are gone, isn't it? And we're in a much healthier place now. Loads of young. I mean, my kid, when he was at university, their war games club was, the majority of them were teenagers who were in their early 20s, and I think that exists because wargaming, board gaming, computer gaming, etc., are all merging over. They all overlap now, and that's fantastic as far as gaming is concerned. It's brilliant.
So our challenge is to get people away from screens and onto the and encouraging their parents, because they say that's so much better for you than the other stuff. So,
yeah.
So I'm looking back and saying, well, you published Pickett's charge in 2016.
Yep.
It's not that long ago. It's only 8 years.
Oh, scary. Yeah.
Scary. And there was a bit of a gap between that. But since then, you've been really prolific. So did you just bank everything up, or you worked on a system that you thought you could apply different ways? Because General de Armee O Group have a lot in common.
Yeah.
So
well, they all. Basically, when I spoke to Rich Clark back there. I mean, what I initially did was I developed a different kind of take on wargaming, using the ADCs, etc., using that methodology. So I thought, okay, well, and it's always a risk, isn't it? If you change stuff and you go down a different route, it's a risk, isn't it? Well, are you going to take wargamers with you? If you take too big a step and jump forward, you probably won't take many people with you, and they'll just go, this is rubbish. And I think Rich Clark got a bit of that when he first published, I can't remember which one it was, either Charlie Don't Surf or I Ain't Been Shot Men.
Yeah.
He made such a big jump forward that a lot of wargamers went, what is this? This is rubbish. This doesn't work. Where's the morale tables? And I was in a similar place. I developed a kind of different way of looking at it, basically because I'd done some more research on command and control, and I thought, because I've done at my particular level in my career, I'd had we were public order trained, is what it was. Riot training is what it was normally known as. And I've done quite a bit of it, both training and in reality. And I thought, right, well, I know the way things work in the modern day with radios, etc., and it's still very difficult and hard to coordinate. So then I did some research into what orders did generals actually give to each other. And excuse me. So I did some research, and effectively I found that once the briefings have been held, they were almost like a kind of 2-word instruction. The classic was, I think it was Lee at Gettysburg to Pickett or Longstreet on the 3rd day. He said, "Where are you going?" And he's just pointed literally to the copse on the ridge and said, "Attack there." And that's your order. There's nothing you can't be massively complicated. You've got divisional commanders, brigadiers, colonels to sort out your deployments, where everyone's going. You don't do any of that. You just set the plan. And I did some research into what orders did Ney get at Quatre Bras? What orders did Ney get at Waterloo? And none of them are the kind of war game order, which is how I developed it from general to brigade. You didn't, Wellington didn't say to something like Picton, right, you're on hold, stay on hold, Picton, and I'll come over and tell you when I want you to attack. All Picton got was hold this section of the ridge. You hold it in any manner you see fit, which is why he then launched a counterattack after the initial clash. So there's a new way of thinking, new way of doing things, using ADCs, and then chucked it at Rich Clark. I thought, well, you're quite an innovative type of guy. You look a bit different. You're perhaps more willing to accept different ideas. And Rich was. And Rich was very useful. So I got Pickett's charge out. Rich Clark and Nick Skinner came along for a game, which is always a dangerous proposition with those two. But it seemed to work. And they really liked it, which is very nice. So I thought, well, if I've carried those two forward, then hopefully they'll be fine. And Rich was very good enough to publish it, and it kind of went from there.
So do you see yourself more as a big battle gamer rather than a platoon, company, smaller action, individual person counts gamer?
Yes, yeah, I do. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, that's generally because a lot of the skirmish games I've played, I can't, there's no real, it has no bearing for me. I think, well, there's no orders are given, nothing's happening here. I can still remember having an English Civil War skirmish where I was a musketeer. And I think I fired the first round on turn 2. And under the game system we used, it took about 8 turns to reload the musket. So I thought, what am I doing here? But I played things like bolt action stuff. Played other sci-fi type skirmish thing. But to me, having done some infantry work, it has no bearing on that. It's too divorced. It's the only one that I think is of real value is obviously chain of command. So I think Rich put some real thought into that. Obviously, I would do it a bit differently. I'd change things, and I've told him that.
That would be third edition.
But on the whole, for me, it's big battles because I think that's where it feels better. And you've got order structure, you've got organizational structure, you've got battalions, you've got brigades, you've got divisions. It all feels right. The look on the table is very important. I'm not taking away anything from beautifully painted individual figures, but the look of mass battalions on a table is just good. It looks fantastic. Yeah, so I am into that kind of moving diorama type thing. I really enjoy that, and also enjoy the interplay between players.
Yep.
So if you have 4, 6, 8 players all playing a game, you've not only got the issues on the table to sort out, the fact you're fighting an opponent, but you've got that interplay between all the players, which is fantastic. Either to the good or the bad. It depends on how well your flank commander's doing. And that's great.
Whether you can spend the dice that you want over there versus the ones that they want as well. So.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah.
So you've done the big battle. You did Civil War Pickett Charge, Grand Army version 1. Then a couple of years later, just prior to COVID, so perfect timing, you do O Group, which suddenly goes from big to battalion level. Was that because that was just it was larger than chain of command? It was a step up, or
no? It was. I've always it wasn't too different to Panzer Grenadier. but I wanted to do a set of World War IIs, but a bit more based on the actual kind of tactics, etc., and organizational structure. So O Group was buy all the manuals, the tactical manuals that you can still get, feed that in with my changing thoughts on command and control and kind of simplification of the gaming system, etc. And I wanted to bring in, I've always had a bugbear about recon, that in a war game, recon is useless in many World War II war game, in any war game. It just rumbles up onto the battlefield. It might be fast, but because it's got really rubbish armor and a rubbish gun, they're pretty pointless. And I thought, having done a tiny bit of recon, I thought, it's not, you know, the value of recon is the information and intelligence and the threat that they have, not their firepower. Again, it's linked back to that weapons and system. They are vital assets. So I thought, right, well, how do I do that? How do we make recon worth having? And from that came combat patrols, scouting the combat patrols, all that sort of stuff. Because obviously one of the things I wanted was, I wanted to try and create a game where you didn't have to write anything down at the beginning, which was the awkward aspect to kind of Panzergrenadier and other World War II sets, is that the defender many times had to draw a map and then write down where all his hidden units were. And I've noted that when you give that to wargamers, the first thing they're keen to get on with the wargame. They've seen the Tiger tank and the models, and they want to get them all on the table.
Yep.
And then when you say to them, all right, what you got to do first is draw a map and write down where all your units are, their excitement levels go from there and they just go immediately drop.
Yeah.
And so I thought, right, so what we need to do is develop a war game that's still exciting and fun, but has very little preparation of writing anything down.
Yeah.
And that's what O Group did.
I think the two things which I think people find challenging of O Group, which is quite interesting, especially for those people who play Flames of War, is one, managing the scouting stuff and using scouts effectively, because once you understand them, they're fantastic. And the others is the company boundaries and who can come on where.
Yeah.
I don't want to bring them over there. I can know perfectly what's going on, but that's where I've said that they have to be. So,
yeah, that's one of those steps that you need to kind of take war game. It was a dangerous step. I can remember the initial drafts didn't have company boundaries in. In fact, they didn't even have A, B, and C company, because there was that fear that war gamers just want to be able to move the Panther or the Shermans wherever they want. But the whole ethos that started to come through O Group was about how to remove information and intelligence from the player, but keeping the game. And combat patrols, one of those company boundaries, actually are doing that. They are restricting the player from having universal knowledge. Because if you put a company on the left, in most war games, you can just think, oh God, look, he's crashing through on the right, I'll just move everyone over. Well, in reality, that's not the way it works. A company has its boundary and A company stays there. And because if you move over into, well, that's, I mean, and if you move over into B company's area, they're going to shoot you because you shouldn't be there. And so the only people they're expecting coming from an odd angle will be the enemy. And I can remember doing many exercises, and the identification of enemy boundaries, either be it brigade, division, corps, front, or whatever, was one of the most vital aspects of it. Once you've identified all the divisional boundaries, you can identify what the enemy's intent is. So I wanted to have that reflection. It restricts them, and also it potentially shows what the enemy intent is, where the boundaries are.
So do you think COVID was a good or bad thing for O Group? because you had the publishing schedule like everything else with that not expected. You know, how did you feel that the game came down when everyone was locked down? Well, in Melbourne, we were all locked down all the time. So
yeah, well, yeah, I know. Yeah, you had it, but I think we all had it pretty bad. I think I probably benefited from getting more playtesting in, because my son, if he wasn't locked down in his little flat doing Zoom lectures at university, he was home for the holidays, and he couldn't do anything. So we just played loads of O Group, and we would just test it and test it and test it to destruction, because Christopher is a different type of wargamer, because he's more used to 40k, and he has that element in him where I kind of don't. He comes in at a different angle, and we can play a game, and he'll suggest doing it that way, and I'll just think, that's just rubbish. That is, what are you talking about, you know? And then we all think about it and you go, actually, he might have a point. And then you'll blend and merge different ideas in. So it's difficult to say. It certainly lost. It was kind of due to go, and then it all just collapsed, isn't it? It just all went into one appalling lockdown and nothing happened. But the good side is it did get some more playtesting, and some more ideas did come out. So maybe it was a better set of rules for COVID, due to COVID. So
Daryl sends his apologies because he's doing a safari in Africa and it's disappointing.
Well,
but he's got to ask these questions because he's a great fan of your books. Was the first person to get General de Armee II out before anyone else, and got it down playing at the club. So look, he's got really two good questions that have just been related to what we're talking about. So the first one is, how much time do you dedicate to playtesting? So is there an optimal amount of time?
No, there's a lot. The whole, I think without, I'm not going to unduly criticize other people's rules, because I'll give anyone who sticks their head above the parapet, writes a set of rules, deserves a bit of credit. They've had the guts to do it. But you can tell those rules that have been play tested and those that have not. And my whole emphasis is every rule gets play tested to death, and you deliberately contrive scenarios to get all these rules in, and then you attack the rules from different wargaming viewpoints. So we will play test a game, and I will deliberately say, one of my colleagues, play testing an ancient set of rules at the moment, and I don't wish to be mean to DBM, but one of my play testers goes, right, I'm going to put my DBM head on here and say that shouldn't happen, or etc. So you put your most pedantic wargamer head on and go, no, I think canister should fire out to 745 yards because that's what it was for a 12-pounder or something like that, whatever it is. And you test it to destruction. Can it survive that? If it can't survive that, what's the reason we're going to say that 12-pounder canister doesn't go out to 750 yards, whatever it is? And so you put all the reasoning down on one side. So when they come out on the forum, quite a lot of the times when people go, recently there was quite a good one about that classic artillery retreating into squares, which for me is a bit of a kind of British propaganda Waterloo myth. You've got the answer already recorded because you play tested that, and you said, well, we're not going to put it in the rules, but we've got the reason behind it, and we'll just put that to one side and keep it in the file. But otherwise, you just play tested to death. Does it work? Does it work? Does it work? Should it be 4+? Should it be 5+? And you keep doing, and you do it with different types of people. So when I go to the club, you have different types of wargamer. You have your, they just want a game. They want to chuck some dice, move some figures. You have your kind of middle of the road wargamer who wants a bit of both. You have your very historical minded wargamer. You're very your armourer type wargamer, who are the guys that are always know every penetration factor of every gun that was ever made.
Every single table they know off by heart.
Yes, they know it all. They don't know, So does it pass the test with all those different types of wargamers? And as long as you're vaguely, yes, you're doing okay, you're taking on board, where the armourer has said X. If we completely ignore him, then that's what? 10% of the wargames world that you've ignored. So what you do is you just merge or just amend the rules slightly to take on board that viewpoint, and then you do that for the rules. So yeah.
Do you play test externally? Do you?
Yeah. We
to get a different cult perspective.
Yeah. So GDA 2 had blind play testing I think is the kind of technical term for it. We had a British club, a couple of British clubs play tested it. A club in Vienna. Little Wars TV very kindly did a little bit in the US, and then we had Carlo Pagano and his boys in your very fine
same club
country.
as Carlo many years ago over
and they play tested it. You just give them kind of a beta version and say play away, and then you do get feedback that you hadn't even thought of.
It's a different meta, I suppose they
because they just think you're not influencing them. They're coming in at a different angle, and you suddenly think, never thought of that. Great, we'll tweak it. And normally it's just about tweaking. But play testing is king.
And at some point of time, you've got to put it in the can, and it goes out to publishing, and that's it.
Yeah, and even it's at no point, and I think many rule writers, I think we're all probably put the same way, it's never finished.
No.
Because there's always something you want to add or tweak or think, oh, maybe I should have done the different version of that. But yeah, you're right. At the end, you've just got to go, draw the line, send it over the top, and we'll see what happens.
Take your rules and say, I'm going to play it this way. And I said, well, I'm happy to play as it's written. And then you go. But,
isn't it? Because I'll hark back to the say, because most wargamers are pretty good guys. They know what they're doing. They are always going to go, I don't like that bit. I think we should do, whatever. It doesn't matter. I think that should have +1, not +3, which is fine, because it's all our individual take. It is a subjective hobby. There's no absolute right or wrong. Because oddly enough, none of us were there on the Napoleonic battlefield, so we don't know. And I'm more than happy with that. Yeah,
it's like the one that I'm quite happy to say the person will listen to this and know exactly who they are and can play it. Doing the command dice when you roll, when you're going to have the extra one, is it going to cost you an extra 1 or a 2 or 3?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's just a waste of time, and so we'll just average it. Okay. Just don't think about it. Just roll it. So,
just roll the dice. Yeah, that's a great one. You can have that. That's part of 2 things, isn't it? That dice roll. It's the game, because as many people say, those sorts of dice rolls create a little bit of tension. How much, it's or drama, as Mr. Clark likes to say. It's will doing a company command order end your turn effectively?
Yes.
Or will you roll a 6, get away with it, and then you're dominating with the initiative?
Or you're doing it at the end, and suddenly you realise you can't do it. So I think it's depending on how people play.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
The other thing that you alluded to earlier about the play testing and thinking, engaging with different people who have different perspectives, that's all part of the research as well.
Yeah.
So, how much time are you devoting purely to research before you start writing the rules and playing, or have you got to the stage where it's actually all happening synergistically? I just dropped the mouse.
Yeah. It's a bit of both. I generally start up with an idea. If we take the ancient rules that is is ongoing at the moment, I just think, right, I have an idea about ancient warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Having stood in a shield wall and had loads of horrible, nasty barbarians charging us, literally trying to rip you limb from limb, you think, right, well, that's an interesting. I can't help it. Every time I was out there in doing either the training or it for real, I was always a Roman centurion. I was always thinking, this is just like the Romans. This is all our tactics were identical to ancient tactics. So the research comes of, I've got a certain idea of how warfare works. Normally it will be one particular angle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just expand upon that. You go, right, well, I'll read about it, because clearly you've got to do some reading. But it's involving a lot of putting your ideas down on paper in the form, I do it in the form of a play sheet. I just write the play sheet first, and then you just go through, you change it. So as the more research comes in, you say you read whatever. You read most of the ancient accounts, most of which just appear to be complete rubbish, and they don't actually help at all. But occasionally, occasionally there's a gem or two, which Rich Clark always goes on about. He tips tactical snippeting, and you'll find something. You'll go, right, okay. So then you change the rules to put that in. You think, well, that's a vital bit. Similar thing was skirmishing in Napoleonics. Right, that's vital. So how do we put that in? So then you just, it's an ongoing process. Research, rules, playing, research, rules, playing.
And you said, well, it's a game that needs to be enjoyable. It can't be absolutely everything that happened to the minutiae. You're focusing on one particular element, engagement of people with their scenarios that you're trying to put in their shoes.
Yeah.
To make that game. So.
Yeah, I mean, you've always got to think, are people going to enjoy it? Are people who aren't heavily into the period going to enjoy it? And that's generally where you put in mechanisms that are hopefully relatively fun and simple. It's rolling 2d6, isn't it? Or rolling a dice, isn't it? And having tables such as in GDA, you've got Destiny. In Pickett's Charge, you've got Serendipity, etc., etc. It's to make to appeal to the game. You have those moments of fun, of a lot, or dramatic incidents where something will happen.
So before you wrote O Group, and you'd been mostly at the divisional level, so larger scale battles, did you ever play Rommel by Sam Mustafa out of the US?
No, I've got like most of these rules, I've got a copy of it, but I don't think I ever played either that or Blucher, though I think I've got them both, but I never played them.
I played Blucher, but it was interesting because Rommel's all about that divisional commander, and you've got certain orders that you can give that you can influence the battle at the time, and it's just like something very similar that you would have thought up. So
yeah, I mean, I just the reason O Group sat where it sits is I also look at what are the majority of wargamers playing with. And the majority of wargamers here in the UK, they've got the soldiers, they've got the tanks, they've got the guns, machine guns, etc., and they want those on the table.
Yeah.
So in order to make it, this kind of sits in the the game, the fun category as well. So you have to design a game that gets all those involved. If you just design a game that says, actually, you don't need any models, just your armored formation is the cavalry symbol, your infantry formation is that. That's not what wargaming is about. It's harking back to that visual aspect. So you have to include it. So, and I think once you get to div level in modern combat, you're entering a different world. It's it's all about time, logistics, etc., and quite frankly, unless you're really into it, logistics is pretty boring. I'm doing a great game at the moment. It's a Western Desert O Group with an ex-Major General, and we've got to come up with a plan. We're the glorious British, and we've got to come up with a plan. And he's brilliant because he's done it all his life. He's very good at asking us to come up with a plan. And of course, because it's in the Western Desert, this plan involves petrol.
Mm.
And my initial reply to him was, can't I get someone from the Royal Logistics School to do that for me? He said, no. You work out how much petrol you need. So you think, oh, okay, all right. Which is it's a good exercise in thinking, God, I'm actually going to have to drop some of the armoured elements here because they gobble up too much petrol. Now, if you introduce that into a war game, most wargamers they wouldn't even turn the page, would they? If you had, right, we've now got a whole chapter on fuel consumption, they're not going to go there.
You have the real roll of dice and you run out of fuel.
Yeah, exactly. That's where that's the game, isn't it? The simulation is paired all the way back to, yeah, we are thinking about logistics, low on ammo, roll a dice, you get a double one, done. That's it.
And everyone says, well, that's no good.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've hit our hour. But so there's one other.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, you've been sitting there very peacefully.
Very quietly, yes, thank you.
Yes. Do you have a question that you would like to ask of David?
No, I don't want to start any controversies or anything like that. So all I can say is that I've played GDA all of 4 times. Just purchased the rules for GDA 2.
Oh, good man.
It seems to be gathering momentum at the club. There are more people interested in playing it. We have already a significant Napoleonics group, but which I used to be a part of, and their chosen rule set is a homegrown version of Empire.
Oh, yes. Yeah. That's it.
They wanted to simplify Empire about 20 years ago when they embarked on this entire endeavor. And now I believe they're up to 18 different charts.
Yeah.
And it has become overly complicated after 10.
But they are very passionate.
It's one of the things about changing rules, isn't it? I was trying to go there's 2 ways most people tend to go when they rehash Empire's the classic, isn't it? When you open that, you need a quick reference sheet to navigate the quick reference sheet that they provide before you even get into the rules. But what most people do is they tend to add more to rules rather than take away. And that's because it's the most natural thing to do, isn't it? You think, well, I don't think command and control's done very well. So you add another table or another element. Whereas really, I think the skill about rule writing is actually taking away rules, but still keeping that core of the rule in there, but you're just taking everything else away. So you're still representing command and control, but it's not done through 20 pages of quick reference sheet. It's done through 2 dice rolls or something. And that's the skill, is doing it that way. So
Phil said, he says, at the end of the day, we could look at all these penetrations, etc., etc. It just comes down to a probability. Roll the dice.
It is, isn't it? If you've got 2 battalions lined up, blazing away at musketry range, there's not a massive difference between the 2. The Brits and the better trained, they did have better musketry drill. They actually trained properly. They actually fired live rounds. They actually went down to Hyde Park and blazed away, and there was commentary on it. But most others, how often would a Landwehr battalion fire live ammunition, or an Austrian, remote Austrian garrison battalion? Live ammunition is expensive. And the colonel who pays for that regiment, well, I ain't going to do that. I'm not wasting my money on live ammunition. They can have 1 live fire test a year. So that's generally you think, why do we need a table with umpteen factors when the 2 opposing units firing are generally going to be about the same? It's just going to be luck on the day. Did they get a good volley off? Did they have damp powder? Did they have nice dry powder? Was it their first volley, did they all remember to level correctly? Or did half of them, because they're in panicking and it's all suddenly a bit different when the enemy's close up and personal, did they all just fire all over the place? So yeah, it's but that's just the way you've got to go. I've got, I wish them every luck with their empire endeavor. It's but
well, our challenge and what we've been is say, let's get people into games, and maybe we start with skirmish so that they can build up to it. Yeah, we've had some success with people starting off with Dark Ages or early medieval and building forces, and suddenly Mike or others will go in and do a 12-foot Hail Caesar battle that have got figures side to side on both sides, and it's
brilliant.
it's brilliant.
And we go down the line, if we get anyone new or at the club who hasn't done it before, is to always involve them in the game. And that means, I'll drop it or go, right, you take that brigade, or we'll share this brigade together. It's don't let them sit on the side, just watch. Go, right, use my figures, here you go. Even change, we've sometimes changed the scenario. We've gone, okay, was a new chap come along. Okay, what we'll do is we'll add another brigade for you. So we'll add another brigade, here you go. So take 4 battalions, keep it simple. You can join on a flank and we'll just guide you through it. But it's getting them involved. They can use our figures, whatever. Then they'll gradually, if they're into it, they'll go, oh, this is great. And then the next time they're on eBay buying figures, or they're coming in with, one of the things I think will be very handy for wargaming is those epic boxes of, small 15mm figures, the Warlord boxes. They're fantastic because then you can just go along. They can just buy, an army box, and they're dead simple to paint. They're all done, sorted. And it's about dropping the barriers to wargaming.
So the final question from Daryl, and I think it's related, so you can put it to the epic boxes. Does that mean there's going to be a Pickett charge too?
Well, yeah, that's still up in the air at the moment. I think there might be. We're doing a public play test of kind of the first draft at an event called CrackCon, which is an interesting take up in Derby. We're going there. We're just going to see how it falls. But possibly, I'm quite reluctant to change it just for the sake of it, because it's still, but there are elements of Pickett's charge and any other set of rules where you think, actually, I think that probably is not as accurate as it could be. One of the things is musket volley range and musketry range. Well, most of it seems to say that they all volleyed pretty much at the same sorts of ranges, whether you had a smoothbore or a rifled musket. So again, it's a question of, do I upset the armourers amongst the American Civil War gamers who think that rifled muskets should be different? So you still need to keep the ranges different, but perhaps not as different as they are currently under Pickett's Charge 1, and changing a few other things. So yeah, possibly. But at the end of the day, it'll probably, if they get published, it'll probably be down to Mr. Clark. And Mr. Clark is a hard-nosed businessman. And I think the top 3 in wargaming are Napoleonics, World War II, and Ancients. And outside of that, the interest in buying rules is reduced. That doesn't make up a massive amount of the market, ACW or anything else. So don't know, maybe, but it's being developed anyway. It's a project that we're there. We've done quite a few play tests of it, and we are tweaking away as we speak.
So we've gone over time. I have one other thing. Have you ever been to Australia, or would you have plans to come and spend some time in our lovely climate down here?
Yeah, no is the answer. I've never been to Australia because it's a very, very long way away.
So it's bloody England.
Yeah, that's just as far the other way.
And I've done it, so time it's your turn.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'll be quite. There's nothing planned, but should anything come up, whether it be a holiday or just some convention or something, it'll probably be with the boy Christopher, because my wife hates flying. She detests it with a passion, so she won't be going. But yeah, it's a definite possibility.
We've just been moving from having our open days for 20 odd years and then a slightly larger games day to we're doing our first show in August. Trying to have as many participation games as possible to show people the breadth of the hobby rather than just doing tournaments or traders. So it's a bit of a different type thing. But all going to plan, we'd be looking to do it again and bigger and better in August 2025.
Okay.
Put it in your diary so you can start planning that away, because it would be great to have people come from the other side of the world down. Because you're isolated as well. It's
I think what you're doing is great. Shows are the way to go. Tournaments are all well and good, but shows get people in, don't they? They get people into that hobby, that they take that one. They'll take that one step over the line, and they'll just dip their toe and they'll go, oh well, I'll just pop down there for 20 minutes. I'll see what it's like. They pop down there for 20 minutes and they're there for the day. So best of luck to you.
Thank you very much. Well, look, David, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much for taking time out of your Saturday morning. And,
thank you.
I've found it really interesting.
Yes, it's absolutely fascinating.
Afterwards, Will. Thank you, Mike, for joining up. Otherwise, we've just been leaving myself. So maybe because it's cold and dark at the moment.
I will. Sorry, Lon, you can finish off.
It's great, and look, honestly, maybe there'll be an opportunity for us to catch up and have another chat, because I think there's lots more for us to talk about. You've been a great guest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much again.
Having me. Okay, cheers then.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Ciao. Bye-bye.